The drive took longer than it should have, not because of traffic, but because I kept negotiating with myself. I told myself I wouldn't stay long. I told myself I was doing it for our mother's memory, for the way she used to insist that Christmas worked like gravity. Everyone eventually pulled back into the same room. I told myself the gifts in the trunk were practical, not desperate. Groceries, a new router, the boring things you buy when you've learned that love in this family is measured by usefulness. By the time I pulled into their driveway, the porch light was on. That felt like permission. My sister opened the door and laughed. Not a nervous laugh, not surprised. A small, genuine laugh, like she'd just been reminded of an inside joke. "Oh," she said, still smiling, "this year's just for family." There are moments when you can hear the hinge of your own pride creak. I felt it then. I didn't ask what she meant. I didn't remind her that I was her brother. I didn't say I'd driven 4 hours. I nodded once the way you do when a stranger tells you the store is closed, and I turned around. I got back into the car. I didn't slam the door. I didn't peel out of the driveway. I let the engine idle for a few seconds because my hands were shaking and I wanted them to stop before I touched the wheel. I drove 10 minutes before my phone buzzed. The message wasn't from her. It was from her husband. Why would that loser even show up? It took a second to register that it wasn't meant for me. That detail mattered more than the word itself. It wasn't a performance. It wasn't anger. It was how he talked when he assumed no one important was listening. I didn't reply. I didn't screenshot it to send to anyone. I pulled into a gas station, parked under a flickering light, and finally let myself breathe all the way out. What surprised me wasn't the hurt, it was the clarity. I thought about the mortgage auto payment I'd set up 3 years ago when he'd been between opportunities, the streaming services under my email because you don't even watch them, the insurance premium I covered quiet after my sister cried on the phone and said she'd handle it, next month. I thought about how none of that had ever been discussed at a table. It lived in apps and confirmations and scheduled transfers, places where voices don't echo. I opened my laptop. There was no dramatic music in my head, no speech, just a familiar login screen. I moved slowly, not because I was savoring anything, but because I wanted to be precise. I canceled the mortgage payment first, not retroactively, just future dated, clean, compliant with the rules. I canceled the insurance transfer, the subscriptions, the phone plan I'd added their daughter to without telling anyone because it felt easier that way. Each action ended with the same dull phrase, "Changes will take effect immediately." I closed the laptop. The drive back felt shorter. The road was empty, the sky low and dark. Somewhere around midnight, my phone started to vibrate. I turned it face down on the passenger seat. I didn't count the calls then. I didn't need to. At home, I slept in my clothes on the couch. I woke before dawn to the sound of my phone rattling itself awake. There were 61 missed calls. One message, "We need to talk." It didn't say sorry. It didn't ask how I was. It didn't explain. It acknowledged a problem and assumed I was still part of the system that fixed things. I made coffee. I watched the light come up through the blinds. A bank notification came in, automated and polite, about a payment not processed. Then an email from a property manager addressed to my sister, forwarded to me by mistake, asking for clarification on a recent change in arrangements. Authority doesn't always wear a uniform. Sometimes it's just a timestamp. I felt something then. Not triumph, relief maybe, or the absence of a weight I hadn't admitted I was carrying. I also felt the cost. This wasn't a clever move that could be undone with an apology and a hug. Systems once changed have memories. I thought about calling my sister. I imagined the conversation branching in predictable ways. Confusion, accusation, bargaining. I imagined explaining myself, laying out receipts like evidence. I realized how badly I wanted to be understood and how little that had ever protected me. So I didn't call. Around mid-morning, another message came in, longer this time. "Careful," it said. There had been a misunderstanding. It said things had gotten out of hand. It said family mattered. I didn't respond to that either. What I did do was pack the gifts back into the trunk. I drove them to a food pantry on the edge of town and left them there without signing the clipboard. On the way home, I stopped thinking about Christmas as a place you go and started thinking of it as something you stop chasing. I don't know what will happen next. I know conversations are coming. I know some doors will stay half open out of habit. I also know this. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't insult anyone back. I didn't ask to be included. I just stopped paying for the privilege of being laughed at. The phone is quiet now. Not resolved, not healed, just still. And for the first time in a long while, that feels like